In the quiet village of Ijibuibo, under the shade of ancient Irako trees, Adebisi walked through the dusty paths, her heart fluttering with anticipation. The villagers' eyes followed her with curiosity, and some with subtle concern. They whispered among themselves, warning her of the man she had been speaking about, Obinna, a man whose charm could blind the wisest of hearts. Yet Adebisi, with her youthful confidence and stubborn streak, brushed off their words as mere gossip. She wanted love, real love, and she believed Obinna was it. Her mother, Mama Kemi, had been especially anxious, her hands wringing the worn cloth she used to cover her head. Adebisi, listen to your elders, she pleaded one evening under the dim glow of the lanterns. That man, there is something about him. You must be careful. But Adebisi's heart was deaf to caution. She had seen Obinna on market day, tall and handsome, speaking with a soft voice that made her knees weak. To her, warnings were shadows in the sun, insignificant and irrelevant. Friends and cousins tried to reason with her. Auntie Saad told me his father's business dealings are cursed, said her friend Ngozi one afternoon. They say misfortune follows his family. But Adebisi laughed it off, swaying her head like a young queen. Ngozi, stop being silly. If love waits for no one, then I will not wait for caution. The stubbornness in her voice carried the weight of someone who had already made up her mind. That night, as the moon cast silver light over the compound, Adebisi lay awake, thinking of Obinna. His eyes haunted her dreams even before they became a reality. The villagers' warnings became distant echoes, replaced by visions of weddings, laughter, and a life she imagined would be perfect. She could not see the cracks hidden beneath his charming smile, the storms lurking behind his soft words. Her heart had already chosen, and reason no longer mattered. The following morning, she dressed in her finest wrapper, the one with deep red and gold embroidery, a gift from her late father. With every fold of the cloth, she imagined the life she wanted, a life with Obinna. The villagers' whispers followed her, carried by the wind, but she ignored them, believing that love could conquer all. Little did she know that some warnings were not meant to be ignored. They were shields against fate's cruel hands. Obinna arrived at the village square with his polished leather shoes and a confident stride, drawing immediate attention. Men nudged each other, and women whispered behind fans, noting his sharp features and calculated charm. Adebisi's heart raced as he approached her, bowing slightly, his voice smooth as flowing river water. Adebisi, your beauty outshines even the morning sun, he said, making her blush and tingle with a mixture of excitement and fear. It was the kind of attention she had dreamed of, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop spinning around them. Her friends looked uneasy, sensing something they could not name. They remembered the whispers, the stories of Obinna's previous relationships that ended in heartbreak and quiet ruin. But Adebisi, wrapped in her own desires, did not hear them. She laughed, a sound that drew even more attention, and reached out to touch his hand. I have never met anyone who speaks with such care, she said. Her words were innocent, but the spark in her eyes spoke of deeper longing, of a soul ready to be consumed by love or tragedy. That evening, they walked through the village fields, sharing stories of childhood and dreams. Obinna's eyes never left hers, and his charm was undeniable. He spoke of the city far away, of wealth and opportunities, painting pictures of a future so bright it blinded her to the shadows that lingered behind him. As the sun set behind distant hills, casting golden light over their faces, Adebisi felt she had found her destiny. Little did she know that destiny often wore masks, and the one in front of her hid a storm beneath its calm. Mama Kemi watched from the doorway, her heart heavy. She had seen too many young girls fall into traps disguised as love. She stepped forward, trembling, but Adebisi waved her off with a confident smile. Mother, stop worrying. I know what I am doing. Mama Kemi could only pray, hoping that the spirits of their ancestors would protect her daughter from the choices her heart blindly embraced. That night, Adebisi dreamed of a wedding, of white lace and laughter. Obinna's face was there, smiling, perfect. But in the corner of her dream, a shadow lurked, whispering her name with cold malice. She woke with a shiver but dismissed it, clutching a pillow to her chest and whispering, "It's nothing. Love will guide me." The stage was set, and neither she nor her mother could imagine how quickly joy could turn into despair. Obinna began visiting Adabezi's home daily, always polite, always charming. He brought gifts, scarves from Lagos, fruits from distant farms, and stories that made her laugh until tears streamed down her cheeks. The villagers watched, some with hope, others with suspicion, as the young couple grew inseparable. Adebisi, blinded by infatuation, believed that no one could understand the depths of her love for him. Her friends tried discreet interventions. Adebisi, I heard from someone that he left a woman crying in Benin, said her cousin Chinyere. But Adebisi brushed it off. Chinyere, you are jealous. He loves me, and I love him. That is all that matters. The stubbornness in her voice was now tinged with defiance. No warning, no story, no history could sway her heart. Obinna, ever the strategist, ensured that every meeting was filled with laughter, love, and promises. He made her feel seen, understood, and special. Yet, behind his smile, his intentions were hidden, and the villagers' whispers grew louder. Mama Kimi tried subtle warnings, suggesting she focus on school or her family, but Adebisi waved her off. Mother, I have chosen him. Your worries are old tales that don't belong to me. Late one night, under a canopy of stars, Obinna held her hand and said, Soon, we will be together forever. Adebisi's heart leaped. She could feel the warmth of the future she wanted, the joy that seemed inevitable. She kissed him lightly, believing she had found a love that would protect her from all misfortune. Yet the wind carried a chill, and distant cries of unseen creatures seemed to warn her. As the weeks passed, their love blossomed, or so it seemed. Neighbors spoke quietly of Obinna's charm and the way it concealed secrets. But Adebisi, intoxicated by love, refused to see beyond the surface. She felt powerful, alive, invincible, and she ignored the faint tremors of warning that lingered at the edges of her happiness. One evening, Elder Tund, a respected figure in the village, approached Adebisi with grave eyes. Child, I have watched this from afar, he said softly, taking her hands in his weathered ones. Obinna is not the man you think he is. Many hearts have been broken because of him. Please, reconsider. Adebisi's chest tightened, a strange mix of irritation and fear rising within her. She shook her head firmly. Elder Tund, I respect you, but I know my heart, she said. Her voice was steady, unwavering. Obinna is kind, he loves me. I feel it in my soul. The elder sighed, knowing that sometimes the strongest hearts could also be the most blind. He looked at Mama Kimi, who was silently weeping beside her daughter, and said, We can only pray that the spirits guide her. That night, the winds howled through the village, rattling doors and windows. Adebisi lay awake, sensing a tension she could not explain. Obinna had returned from a trip to the city. His demeanor subtly changed, his eyes colder, his words sharper, but she dismissed it. Love, she told herself, would smooth over any cracks. She did not yet know that cracks, when ignored, could widen into chasms of despair. Her dreams grew restless. She saw flashes of herself trapped, crying for help that never came. Obinna's face appeared in those visions, smiling but distant, unfeeling. She awoke drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. But morning brought clarity, or so she thought, and she smiled at him when he appeared with breakfast, convincing herself that fear was simply the enemy of love. By the next week, she had decided to marry him, ignoring every warning, every plea, every whisper from her heart. To Adebisi, it was a brave, decisive act of love. To the village, it was the beginning of a tragedy that would unfold like a storm over calm waters, unseen until it struck with merciless force. The village gathered for Adebisi and Obinna's engagement. Drums echoed through the hills, and women danced in colorful wrappers, singing songs of joy and union. Adebisi glowed in her new attire, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Friends and family surrounded her, giving blessings and gifts, yet a subtle tension lingered, like smoke that no wind could disperse. Obinna was charming, graceful, and perfect in public. Yet some elders exchanged knowing glances, recalling the stories, the heartbreaks, and the unspoken truths. Mama Kimi stood at a distance, tears brimming, praying silently for protection over her daughter. She whispered an old prayer, calling upon the ancestors to shield Adebisi from the consequences of choices made in haste. As the celebration continued, laughter and music masking the undercurrent of dread, Adebisi felt unstoppable. She believed she had conquered fear, that love had triumphed over caution. She danced with Obinna, their movements in sync, yet she could not sense the cold shadow behind his smile, the shadow that would soon turn her joy into sorrow. Late into the night, as guests departed and the fireflies danced around the compound, Obinna whispered in her ear, "Soon, my love, everything will be ours." Adebisi, entranced, kissed him without realizing that words could sometimes be traps, designed to ensnare hearts rather than protect them. By the next morning, the village returned to its quiet rhythm, but the echoes of warnings remained in the hearts of those who cared. Adebisi, however, was blissfully unaware. She had chosen her path, and little did she know, the journey she embraced would take her into darkness she could never have imagined. The first weeks after the engagement were painted with smiles, yet beneath the surface, cracks began to appear. Obinna's charm, which had once felt like warmth, began to chill Adebisi's heart in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. He would disappear for hours, returning with excuses that sounded believable, yet the unease in Adebisi's chest grew heavier with each passing day. The villagers watched silently, knowing the signs too well, their old tales whispering of hearts ensnared by deceit. One afternoon, while preparing for the wedding feast, Adebisi noticed Obinna speaking sharply to the market vendors, his voice cutting like a knife. The way people flinched at his words, the fear in their eyes, unsettled her. "Obinna, what is this?" she asked softly, but he smiled, smooth and reassuring. "My love, do not let small matters bother you. Business is business, nothing to trouble your heart." But the unease did not leave her. Something inside whispered warnings she had tried so hard to ignore. Mama Kemi noticed the change too. During their nightly chats, she gently tried to probe. "Adebisi, my child, the man you love, do you truly know him?" Her words, though tender, carried an unspoken urgency. Adebisi, desperate to hold on to the love she had chosen, shook her head firmly. "Mother, I know Obinna. He is everything I want. Don't worry, I am safe with him." Mama Kemi's eyes filled with tears, knowing that love sometimes blinded the soul more than darkness ever could. That night, alone in her room, Adebisi's dreams were haunted. She saw Obinna's face morphing into something she could not recognize, cold, distant, almost cruel. She woke screaming, her body trembling, but when she looked at him the next morning, he smiled, kissed her forehead, and said, "Sleep well, my love. Nothing can harm you while I am here." Her heart ached with confusion. How could someone who loved her so dearly appear so frightening in her dreams? She pushed the fear aside, convincing herself that dreams were meaningless, but the first threads of doubt had been sown. The village elders whispered among themselves as the engagement period continued. Elder Tund approached Mama Kemi privately. "I fear this girl is walking into shadows she cannot escape. Warn her again, for fate is patient, but consequences are not." Mama Kemi's hands shook. She wanted to shout, to pull Adebisi back, but the stubbornness of youth is a force few can stop. Love, it seemed, had blinded her daughter entirely, and the warning bells of destiny echoed uselessly through the walls of her heart. The days leading to the wedding were a whirl of color, music, and excitement. Adebisi's laughter filled the compound as she tried on multiple gowns, each more elaborate than the last. Friends and relatives complimented her endlessly, praising her beauty and joy. Yet the shadow of unease lingered like an unwelcome guest, gnawing at the corners of her mind. Obinna was by her side, charming as ever, but his brief moments of irritation, quick flashes of anger, now seemed less excusable and more alarming. The wedding planners spoke of every detail: drums, food, dances, and gifts, but the villagers could not shake their foreboding. Chinyere, her cousin, pulled her aside one evening. "Adebisi, I beg you, take a moment to look at him carefully. I have seen men like Obinna. They wear masks that are easy to fall in love with, but the face behind, it is not kind." Adebisi smiled, dismissing her concern. "Chinyere, you worry too much. This is my choice. Don't ruin my happiness." Yet in her heart, a faint, uncomfortable whisper reminded her that love alone could not shield her from reality. Obinna, however, played the perfect partner in public. He appeared loving, attentive, and generous. He handed her flowers, arranged for musicians to serenade her, and smiled with a warmth that melted doubts in the faces of everyone who watched. But private moments told a different story. When the doors were closed, his words carried a subtle threat, a control that chilled her blood. Remember, Edebizi, a wife must obey, or life can become very difficult. He whispered once, his eyes glinting strangely. She forced a laugh, pretending she had not noticed, afraid to admit the growing fear within. Mama Kemi, unable to bear it any longer, sat by her daughter's side one night, holding her hands tightly. "Child, I beg you, listen to me. A man can wear any mask. Obinna, I fear he is not who he pretends to be." Adebizi's eyes filled with tears, a mix of frustration and defiance. "Mother, I love him. I have chosen this path. Stop worrying. Everything will be fine." Mama Kemi could only nod silently, praying that divine intervention would guard her child against the storm she could not yet see. The night before the wedding, as lanterns flickered across the compound and drums echoed in the distance, Adebizi felt a strange sense of anticipation. The village celebrated around her, unaware of the tension that now thrummed in the air. She held Obinna's hand, feeling the strength of his grip, yet in her heart, a question lingered unspoken. Was love enough to protect her from what she did not yet know? The sun rose over Ijibuibo, painting the village with hues of gold and crimson. The wedding procession began, drums echoing like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Adebizi walked down the aisle in a gown of intricate lace, her eyes sparkling with excitement, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for Obinna's. Friends and family cheered, unaware that the celebration was the calm before the storm. Obinna smiled, perfectly composed, his words gentle and reassuring as he held her hands. "My love, today begins forever," he whispered, his voice smooth and honeyed. Adebizi believed him, feeling the swell of happiness and triumph. Yet a few observant elders noticed the slight twitch in his jaw, the way his eyes briefly flickered with something dark before returning to charm. It was a warning, subtle but clear to those who had learned to read shadows. The ceremony continued with joy, drums, and ululations. Tears streamed down Adebizi's face, tears of happiness and disbelief. She had dreamed of this day since childhood, and now it was real. Friends danced, relatives sang, and the village rejoiced. Obinna kissed her hand, promising her a life of love and prosperity. Adebizi, caught in the rapture of her dreams, ignored the flicker of fear that crept into her chest. After the ceremony, the feast began. Dishes of pounded yam, egusi soup, and jollof rice filled the long tables. Guests laughed and shared stories, while Adebizi and Obinna sat at the head, smiles plastered across their faces. Yet in the shadows of the hall, whispers lingered, tales of Obinna's past marriages, tales of quiet despair that no one spoke aloud but everyone knew. Adebizi felt a small chill, but she dismissed it, telling herself that love had triumphed over fear. As night fell and the last guests departed, Adebizi and Obinna retreated to their new home. She felt dizzy with joy, imagining the life they would build. Yet as the door closed behind them, the air seemed colder, the shadows deeper, and the first taste of the reality she had ignored began to seep into her soul. What she had been warned about, she would soon face, and it would be far worse than she ever imagined. The house was grand, larger than anything Adebizi had ever imagined. Candles flickered, casting warm glows on the walls, but the silence was heavier than expected. Obinna held her hand tightly as they entered, his smile unwavering, yet his eyes held a strange intensity that made her stomach twist. "Welcome home, my love," he said softly. Adebizi's heart leapt with excitement, but the unease she had tried to ignore began to whisper louder. Their first night together should have been filled with laughter, intimacy, and joy. But Obinna's demeanor shifted quickly. Small demands, subtle criticisms, and moments of coldness began to surface. "Adebizi, you will do things my way," he said, his voice low and controlled. "Do not question me." Adebizi froze, a tear escaping her eye. She wanted to speak, to protest, but the words died in her throat. Love had blinded her, but fear now began to plant roots. The hours stretched long and tense. Obinna's charm was gone, replaced by authority and an unspoken threat that Adebizi could not ignore. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind, chilling her blood. "Why didn't I listen?" she whispered into the darkness, her fingers trembling. She clutched the blanket, her heart pounding, realizing that the man she had loved so blindly held a side of himself she had never seen until now. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, a mournful song that seemed to echo her despair. Dreams of happiness evaporated into shadows, replaced by fear and uncertainty. Adebisi lay awake, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming silently down her face. The woman who had walked into marriage with hearts full of hope now confronted the first taste of a reality she could not escape. By dawn, Adebisi had learned her first lesson. Love alone cannot shield one from cruelty. Obinna awoke with a smile, pretending that nothing had changed, and Adebisi forced herself to return the smile, knowing that survival required masks as well. The first day of their marriage ended not with joy, but with the heavy weight of unspoken dread, a shadow that would grow darker with each passing day. In the following days, Adebisi discovered that life with Obinna was far from the love she had imagined. He controlled her every action, demanded her obedience, and subtly isolated her from family and friends. Calls from relatives were met with irritation and excuses, and slowly, the warmth of her village support began to fade. Her world shrank, leaving her trapped under the charm and cruelty of a man she had once adored. Mama Kimmy's heart ached as letters and messages went unanswered. The once vibrant laughter of Adebisi turned into quiet sobs in the night. Obinna watched her closely, always calm, always persuasive, until Adebisi doubted herself, wondering if she had imagined the first cracks in his demeanor. Love had become a cage, and she could feel the bars closing around her soul. One evening, she tried to speak to him, tears in her eyes. Obinna, I feel lonely. I miss my family, my friends. His reaction was swift and chilling. You are my wife now. You have no need for anyone else. If you seek anything outside this home, you will regret it. Fear gripped her chest like a vice. The man she had loved had become a stranger whose warmth had vanished, leaving only darkness and control. The villagers began noticing her absence at market, at gatherings, and in the compounds where she once laughed freely. Whispers spread, but Obinna dismissed them with charm in public and threats in private. Adebisi's heart grew heavy with despair, but still, hope flickered faintly, a hope that love could be reclaimed, that the man she married could return to the one she had once adored. At night, she wept silently, holding a worn photograph of her mother and childhood home. The warnings, the whispers, the pleas, all had been true. She had chosen a path illuminated by charm, but shadowed by cruelty. And as the moonlight fell on her face, casting long shadows across the room, Adebisi realized that the love she had chased blindly had transformed into a nightmare she could not yet escape. The days grew heavier in Obinna's house. Adebisi's laughter, once free and bright, was now replaced with quiet sighs and whispered prayers. She tried to leave the compound to visit her mother, but Obinna's sharp words stopped her before she could even step out. You belong here, Adebisi. Outside these walls, you are nothing. Do not test me, he warned, his eyes darkening with a storm she had never imagined. That night, she sat alone on the veranda, clutching a small talisman her mother had given her, praying for guidance. The wind whistled through the trees as though echoing her fear, and distant drums from the village reminded her of the life she had left behind. The fear in her chest was no longer subtle. It had become a living thing, gnawing at her every thought. Obinna entered silently, his presence dominating the room. Why do you sit here thinking? Your thoughts are dangerous, he said, his voice deceptively calm. Adebisi trembled, the warmth she had once felt from him gone entirely. I am just thinking, she whispered, trying to steady her voice. He approached closer, a shadow over her heart. You will learn, my love, that thoughts can be dangerous for those who disobey. The words sent shivers down her spine. Her mind raced with the warnings she had once ignored. Mama Kimmy's tears, Elder Tun's pleas, Chinyer's quiet caution. She now understood the full weight of what she had dismissed. Obinna's charm had been a mask, and behind it lay control, cruelty, and a hunger for absolute obedience. Her dreams of love had twisted into fear, yet her heart still ached for the man she thought he was. By dawn, Adebisi's tears had soaked the pillow she clutched, her knuckles white from holding it tightly. She stared at the first rays of sunlight breaking through the curtains, realizing that the man she had chosen had transformed her world. She was trapped, not by chains, but by the love she had blindly embraced. Weeks passed, and Obinna's control grew more suffocating. Friends who once visited were no longer allowed. Letters from her family were intercepted and returned unread. Adebisi began to feel the full weight of isolation. She wandered the house, moving from room to room, haunted by memories of the freedom she once had. Even the servants avoided her gaze, fearful of Obinna's wrath if they spoke to her. One afternoon, Adebisi tried to call her mother from a hidden corner of the compound. Obinna discovered the attempt and seized the phone. "Do you defy me, Adebisi? This is your home now, and your loyalty belongs to me alone," he hissed, his hand tight around hers. Fear rooted her to the spot. That same night, she cried silently in the darkness, wishing she could undo the choices she had made. Her only solace was the small garden outside the house, where she could see the stars and breathe the night air. There, she whispered to the heavens, asking for mercy, asking for strength, asking for someone to help her escape the man who had turned love into fear. She clutched the talisman from her mother tightly, feeling a faint glimmer of hope. But she knew that hope alone could not fight the cruelty that now surrounded her. Obinna, meanwhile, continued to manipulate her every move. "Your happiness depends on obedience, Adebisi. Remember that," he reminded her one evening after dinner, the words slicing deeper than any physical blow could. She nodded silently, swallowing her pride, but the ache in her heart grew heavier with each passing day. The life she had envisioned, the laughter, love, and joy, was slipping further away, replaced by shadows and fear. By the end of the week, Adebisi realized she was no longer the vibrant young woman who had danced through the village streets. She was trapped, her spirit bent, her soul weighed down by the man she had married. Every smile she forced for him felt like a betrayal of her true self. And yet, the embers of her courage still flickered, waiting for a spark to ignite them. One night, Adebisi could no longer endure the silence and oppression. She wrote a letter to her mother in secret, pouring her heart onto the page. She described the coldness, the fear, the isolation, and the small acts of cruelty that had begun to define her marriage. Trembling, she hid the letter under her pillow, hoping the next opportunity to send it would bring help. Obinna, however, had a sixth sense for disobedience. He noticed her anxiety and pressed her. "Adebisi, what troubles you? You look restless tonight." She forced a smile, holding the letter tight in her hand. "Nothing, Obinna. I am just tired," she whispered. But he wasn't convinced. The shadow in his eyes deepened, and he leaned closer, his breath cold against her ear. "Remember, my love, secrets are dangerous." The days following were tense. Adebisi felt like a bird in a cage, every movement watched, every word measured. Even small acts of defiance, like laughing too loudly or speaking to a servant, were met with veiled threats. She began to doubt her own senses, questioning whether she had imagined the cruelty or whether it was real. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, "Child, I fear for you." But her spirit, though battered, had not fully broken. Late at night, under the cover of darkness, she would pray, calling on ancestors, spirits, and the gods for strength. She dreamed of escaping, of returning home, of seeing the familiar faces of her family. Each prayer was a spark, each tear a reminder that she had a life worth fighting for, even if she could not yet see the path forward. One night, as Obinna slept, she held the letter close to her chest and whispered, "I will survive. Somehow, I will survive." The resolve in her voice was fragile but real, a quiet defiance against the man who believed he had destroyed her completely. It happened subtly at first, a cold glance, a missed meal, a quiet reprimand. But soon, Obinna's cruelty escalated. One evening, he criticized Adebisi for laughing at a story a servant told, declaring it unfit for his house. When she tried to defend herself, he grabbed her wrist tightly. "You forget, Adebisi, your life now belongs to me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The words burned into her soul, leaving her breathless. The nights became unbearable. Obinna demanded she sleep only in certain ways, eat certain foods, and speak only when spoken to. He mocked her traditions, belittled her prayers, and slowly stripped away the pieces of her identity she had once cherished. Adebisi felt herself fading, a shadow of the vibrant woman she had been. Her dreams of love had curdled into a nightmare, each day a trial of endurance. Mama Kimmy's letter had yet to arrive. Adebisi longed for the familiar scent of her mother's voice, the gentle comfort of family. Yet she could not reach them, and every attempt to escape was met with threats and manipulation. Obinna's charm was gone now, replaced by a calculated coldness that kept her in a state of constant fear. One night, after another small humiliation, Adebisi curled into herself and cried until she could not breathe. "Why did I ignore the warnings? Why did I let love blind me?" she whispered into the darkness. Her tears stained the pillow, each one a testament to innocence betrayed, to trust broken, to a heart shattered by the man she had once adored. And in the shadows, Obinna watched, believing he had complete control. But in Adebisi's heart, a spark of defiance had begun to glow, a tiny ember that, if nurtured, could one day ignite into a fire powerful enough to change everything. One day, while Obinna was away on business, Adebisi stumbled upon a hidden drawer in his study. Curiosity, fear, and desperation drove her hands to open it. Inside were letters, photographs, and documents revealing the dark truth. Obinna had been married before, leaving trails of sorrow and broken lives wherever he went. Women who had trusted him had vanished from their communities, some forced to leave everything behind. Her heart pounded as she read the names, some familiar from village whispers. She felt a cold shiver run through her body, her face pale. The man she had married was a master of deceit, a man who wielded charm as a weapon. Tears flowed freely as the reality of her situation hit her like a flood. She had walked blindly into a trap, and the warnings had been true. Yet amidst despair, clarity began to emerge. She could see patterns now, the isolation, the control, the small acts of cruelty. They were all calculated, all deliberate. Obinna's charm had been a mask, and behind it lay the darkness she had only glimpsed in dreams. Adebisi realized that survival required action, courage, and cunning. She would need every ounce of strength she possessed to navigate the treacherous path ahead. For the first time since her marriage, Adebisi felt determination ignite within her. Tears still flowed, but they were now mixed with resolve. She whispered to herself, "I will not be broken. I will find a way." The path was uncertain, dangerous, and terrifying, but it was a path she now knew she had to walk. As the sun set outside, casting long shadows across the room, Adebisi clutched the talisman her mother had given her and vowed silently to herself. No matter the cost, she would reclaim her life. Obinna's reign of control had begun, but it was not yet complete, because Adebisi's spirit, though battered, was far from defeated. Adebisi moved quietly through the house, clutching the papers she had discovered in Obinna's drawer. Each document told a story of heartbreak, deceit, and manipulation, and with every word, the resolve in her chest grew stronger. She could no longer be a passive victim. The woman who had danced freely in the village streets was buried beneath fear, but the spark of rebellion had been lit. She began small, writing secret letters to her mother, whispering to the wind as if it were an ally, and learning to move quietly, avoiding Obinna's watchful gaze. Every step required courage. Every breath felt like a risk. She realized that survival depended on strategy, patience, and silence. Fear was still her companion, but defiance now walked beside her. That night, she listened to Obinna's slow breathing from the bedroom next door, calculating her next moves. She memorized the layout of the house, the schedules of the servants, and the patterns of her husband's mood swings. Every detail could be used to her advantage. The realization was painful. She could not rely on anyone else. The fight for her freedom was hers alone. Outside, the village slept peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing in Obinna's house. Adebisi's eyes gazed at the stars, and she whispered a prayer to the spirits that had watched over her childhood. "Guide me, protect me, give me strength," she murmured. A small smile formed despite the fear, the first sign that the girl who had been trapped was beginning to reclaim her spirit. By dawn, Adebisi had crafted a plan. It was risky, fraught with danger, but it was her only path to reclaiming the life she had lost. She tucked the letters and documents safely into her wrapper, letting them brush against her heart like a shield. For the first time since her marriage, she felt a glimmer of control over her own destiny. That night, as Adebisi slept uneasily, she dreamed vividly. In the dream, her late father appeared beneath a glowing Irako tree, his voice deep and commanding. "Child, you have been warned, yet you still have the strength to fight," he said. She reached out, tears in her eyes, and felt a warmth spread through her body. The spirits of her ancestors surrounded her, whispering guidance, urging her to be brave and clever. When she woke, the memory of the dream lingered like a flame. Her father's words, her ancestors' whispers, they gave her a renewed sense of purpose. Fear was still present, but it was no longer paralyzing. She began observing Obinna with new eyes, noticing the subtle cracks in his arrogance, the ways he underestimated her resolve. Every weakness she saw became a potential tool for survival. The dream also revealed something else, a path she had overlooked. A secret passage in the house that led to the compound's outer edges, a route she could use to send messages to her mother. It was risky, but with careful planning, it might work. Her heart pounded with both fear and hope. The spirits had shown her the way, but the journey would demand courage beyond what she had ever imagined. Later that day, she tested the passage when Obinna was away, moving with quiet precision. The walls, the doors, and the shadows became her allies. Each successful step filled her with cautious confidence, proving that her mind and body, though tired, were still capable of reclaiming freedom. The first taste of agency since her wedding felt intoxicating, and she dared to dream again, just a little. By nightfall, Adebisi had sent a secret message to her mother, telling her that she was alive, that she had hope, and that help would come. The letter was brief, coded in a way only her mother could understand. But it was a lifeline, a reminder that the world outside Obinna's house had not forgotten her. Obinna, however, was not oblivious. Though he maintained his public charm, he began noticing Adebisi's subtle defiance. A misplaced smile, a hurried step, a lingering glance outside the window. Each tiny act made him suspicious. "Adebisi, you seem restless," he said one evening, his voice cold, his eyes sharp. The threat in his tone made her pulse race. She forced calm, nodding, and smiled softly. "I am well, Obinna, just thinking." But he knew better. Over the next few days, he tested her, asking questions about where she had been, what she had done, and subtly probing for secrets. Adebisi remained silent, careful with her words, but the fear in her chest never fully left. Every day was a battle of wits and patience. One wrong move, and the fragile thread holding her life together could snap. Her mother's letters had begun arriving, hidden in plain sight. They brought guidance, encouragement, and coded instructions to remain safe. With each letter, Adebisi felt her resolve strengthen, realizing that she was not entirely alone. Obinna could control her body, her movements, but her mind and spirit, those remained untouchable. Late at night, as Obinna slept, Adebisi whispered to herself, "You may control the house, but you cannot control me completely. Not my mind, not my soul." Fear still clung to her like a shadow, but courage was slowly rising, a steady flame that would not be easily extinguished. By the end of the week, Obinna's suspicion had grown into quiet rage, though he maintained his charming mask in public. Adebisi, aware of the danger, became even more careful, blending patience, cleverness, and courage. The game of survival had begun in earnest. Through coded letters and whispers to trusted servants, Adebisi began to form a small network of allies. Though few, they were loyal and brave enough to help her navigate the dangers of Obinna's household. Together, they planned small acts of defiance, hidden messages, tiny escapes from rooms, and careful observations of Obinna's movements. Every act was dangerous, but every success fueled her spirit. One evening, she confided in a loyal servant, Adeobi, who had been with her family for years. "I will help you, mistress," Adeobi said, her eyes fierce with determination. "We cannot let him destroy you." Adebisi felt a surge of hope. For the first time since the wedding, she realized she had support, that the fight to reclaim her freedom did not rest solely on her shoulders. They began coordinating small plans, messages to her mother, ways to gather evidence of Obinna's cruelty, and routes to safely move around the house without detection. Each small victory became a lifeline, a way to reclaim control over the life that Obinna had sought to dominate. Adebisi felt the power of strategy, courage, and unity, realizing that survival required both the heart and the mind. But the stakes were higher than ever. If Obinna discovered even a hint of the network forming, the consequences would be dire. Every whisper had to be careful, every movement precise. Adebisi's mind, sharpened by fear and necessity, became a weapon in its own right, a weapon that could eventually turn the tables. By nightfall, Adebisi had begun to feel a faint hope, dangerous, fragile, but real. She knew the path ahead would be treacherous, but she now believed she could navigate it, step by step, toward freedom. The house was silent, but the silence was heavy, almost suffocating. Adebisi sat on the edge of her narrow bed, the shadows of the moon crawling across the room through the half-open window. For months, fear had been her constant companion. Every glance, every word, every step measured under the oppressive weight of Obinna's temper. But tonight was different. Tonight, something inside her stirred, a spark that had been smothered too long. She clenched the small letters she had written, documenting every act of cruelty, every manipulation, every whispered threat. They were dangerous in their very existence, proof of her suffering and the truth of Obinna's control. Holding them, she felt a surge of power. It was the first time she truly realized that knowledge could be more powerful than fear. Obinna was in the next room, pacing, muttering to himself, drunk on his own arrogance. He thought he had broken her, that she had become the timid, obedient bride he demanded. But he had misjudged her heart. Adebisi rose slowly, deliberately, her footsteps silent but purposeful. She approached the ornate wooden table in the center of the room, where he had placed a new set of rules for her life. A list of prohibitions, restrictions, and threats written in sharp, cruel ink. With trembling hands, she tore the papers from the table, letting the inked words flutter to the floor. Each sheet was a declaration, a symbolic destruction of the fear that had ruled her life. Her chest heaved with adrenaline as she gathered the torn fragments into her hands. "I am not yours," she whispered, her voice shaking but fierce. "I will not live in fear." The sound of her whisper seemed to echo through the walls. Obinna appeared suddenly in the doorway, his eyes wide with fury and disbelief. What are you doing?" he bellowed, his voice like a whip cracking through the room. But Adebisi did not flinch. Instead, she took a step forward, holding the torn letters high, her eyes locking with his. "I am done obeying your cruelty," she said. "I am not yours to control." Obinna's face twisted with rage, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles whitened. He advanced toward her, the air between them thick with menace. But Adebisi stood her ground, heart pounding, terror mixed with exhilaration. She realized in that moment that courage was not the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. "Do you think this defiance will make you free?" Obinna hissed, his voice dripping with venom. Adebisi's lips trembled, but she smiled faintly, a sharp, knowing curve of defiance. "Freedom isn't given. It's claimed," she whispered. And with that, she turned and slipped a hidden key into her pocket, a key her distant cousin Ayabo had secretly given her days earlier. It was the key to the secret passage that led out of the compound. Obinna lunged, but she was faster. Using the shadows, the narrow corridors, and her intimate knowledge of the house, Adebisi dodged him, slipping into the passageway. The walls closed around her like a protective cloak. Every heartbeat was loud in her ears, every breath a battle, yet she moved forward with a clarity she had never known. She realized she was no longer just surviving. She was planning, fighting, and reclaiming herself. For the first time, fear did not control her. Adrenaline coursed through her veins like fire, turning trembling legs into determined strides. Every step along the secret corridor was a declaration. She would no longer be silenced, humiliated, or dominated. She was a force of her own making, a woman with a plan and the courage to see it through. As she reached the final door leading to the garden, moonlight spilling across the grass like silver hope, Adebisi paused. She looked back toward the house, toward Obinna, whose shadow still lingered in the doorway, a faint reminder of the danger that waited. But she did not retreat. She smiled through tears of fear, relief, and triumph. She had done it. She had defied him. And for the first time, she felt like herself again. That night, the garden witnessed the birth of Adebisi's rebellion. The moonlight reflected off her tear-streaked but resolute face, and somewhere in the village, the wind carried whispers of courage. She had broken the first chain. She had acted, and nothing, not Obinna, not fear, could take away that first act of defiance. The dawn barely touched the sky when Obinna awoke to an empty room. Panic flared first, sharp and hot, followed immediately by rage. His eyes darted around the bed, the blankets, the small wooden table, the torn letters. Gone. And then it hit him. Adebisi had defied him, truly and boldly. His chest heaved as he slammed his fist against the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the silent house. "How dare she?" he roared, his voice raw with fury. Obinna's mind raced, a storm of anger and disbelief. He had controlled everything, her movements, her speech, her very thoughts. And yet, somehow, she had acted, stolen the letters, and disappeared into the shadows. That one act of defiance ignited a fury that he had never felt before, a dangerous combination of pride wounded and ego humiliated. "I will crush her spirit," he muttered, pacing the room. "I will remind her who she belongs to." Meanwhile, Adebisi crouched in a corner of the secret corridor, her small body pressed against the cool stone. Her heart raced, each beat a drum of fear and exhilaration. She had seen the first spark of triumph, but now, as she heard Obinna's distant shouts echoing through the walls, she realized the true cost of defiance. The man she had dared to confront was more dangerous than ever. She clutched the letters close to her chest, reminding herself why she had risked everything. Courage, she whispered, must outweigh fear. Obinna stormed through the house, shaking doors, rattling windows, and demanding the servants tell him what had happened. His rage was contagious, turning the household into a place of tension and terror. Even the loyal servants, who had once been indifferent, now moved like shadows, whispering hurried warnings to Adebisi where they could. The man who once ruled the house with cold, calculated cruelty was now a whirlwind of fury, unpredictable and terrifying. That evening, Obinna confronted Adebisi directly. The room seemed smaller, heavier, every shadow a weapon in his eyes. "Do you think this is a game?" he snarled, his hands shaking with barely contained anger. Adebisi's chest rose and fell with controlled breaths. She did not flinch, though her fingers trembled slightly as they gripped the small talisman her mother had given her. "No," she said softly but firmly. "It is my life. I will not be your victim." Obinna's eyes narrowed, disbelief and rage warring for dominance in his expression. He advanced toward her, each step measured, deliberate, meant to intimidate. Yet, the closer he came, the more Adebisi realized something remarkable. She did not feel the same paralyzing terror she had before. She was terrified, yes, but now the fear carried purpose. It sharpened her senses instead of dulling them. "You dare speak to me like this?" Obinna's voice thundered, but Adebisi held his gaze. Her lips quivered, but her eyes blazed with a quiet fire. "I am not afraid of you anymore," she said, the words trembling yet unyielding. Her defiance struck him like a physical blow, destabilizing the authority he had clung to for so long. He had always been in control, and for the first time, he felt the ground beneath him shift. In that charged silence, the servants exchanged glances, the tension nearly tangible. Some began whispering prayers, others hid quietly, knowing that even the smallest movement could provoke his wrath. Adebisi, standing in the center of the storm, felt the enormity of what she had done. She had defied a tyrant and survived, but she also knew that Obinna's fury was far from over. That night, as she lay awake, listening to the distant, furious muttering from Obinna's study, Adebisi felt the weight of both fear and power. One act of defiance had changed everything, not just her relationship with Obinna, but her own understanding of herself. She was no longer just a victim. She was a fighter. And though the road ahead would be perilous, she now understood that courage, once tasted, could not be silenced. The fire of defiance had been lit, and no amount of rage, no amount of control, could snuff it out. Obinna's fury would continue to rage like a storm, but Adebisi had learned something he could never fully grasp. Power over the mind and spirit could not be enforced with fear alone. The house was cloaked in darkness, save for the faint slivers of moonlight sneaking through the cracks in the windows. Adebisi sat on the floor of her room, her heart hammering in her chest like a war drum. Tonight was the night she would act, the night she would test the escape route she had memorized, the secret corridor that promised freedom but demanded courage. Every sound, the distant hoot of an owl, the creak of the roof, the shuffle of a stray animal outside, felt magnified, like the world itself was holding its breath. She reached for the small iron key Ayabo had secretly given her days earlier. Its weight in her palm was both terrifying and empowering. She traced the cool metal with her fingers, reminding herself of the purpose it held. Each moment she delayed, fear threatened to claw back control, whispering that Obinna was waiting, that a single misstep could cost her life. But she pressed down on the trembling in her hands and steeled herself. Tonight, she would move. Slipping from her room, Adebisi pressed herself against the walls, each step slow, measured, silent. The house that had once been her prison now felt like a labyrinth she had mastered. She knew every creaking board, every uneven stone, every shadow where danger could hide. Yet even with this knowledge, her pulse raced. She paused at every corner, listening. Footsteps? No. Breaths? None. The corridor ahead yawned like a tunnel of possibility, both terrifying and inviting. Halfway through, she encountered her first obstacle, a small servant boy patrolling the hallway unexpectedly. Panic surged, but Adebisi's training in silence and observation kicked in. She flattened herself against the stone wall, heart thundering, counting each step the boy took. Her breath caught in her throat as he paused, sniffed the air, then moved on, oblivious to the shadow pressed against the wall. A surge of relief and adrenaline mingled in her veins. One small victory, but a victory nonetheless. As she approached the secret door at the end of the passage, the garden outside shimmering faintly under moonlight, Adebisi's mind raced with possibilities. What if she was caught now? What if Obinna discovered her in the act? She pressed her ear to the door, holding her breath. Silence. With careful hands, she inserted the key into the lock, turning it with the utmost delicacy. The soft click sounded like a symphony in her ears. She pushed the door open slowly, the cool night air washing over her face. Freedom felt almost within reach. But then, a sudden creak behind her. Obinna's shadow fell across the passageway, massive and menacing, his eyes ablaze with fury. He had discovered her attempt, perhaps following instinct or intuition. Fear surged, icy and paralyzing, but she could not freeze. Every lesson of patience, observation, and courage crystallized in her mind. She ducked into the nearest shadow, pressing herself against the wall as he stormed past, a roar of rage filling the corridor. The garden was just beyond, bathed in silver light. She ran, every step a balance of hope and terror, branches snapping beneath her feet. Behind her, Obinna's furious shouts echoed through the night, promising violence, promising retribution. But she did not stop. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed, and tears blurred her vision. But she ran, driven by the raw power of defiance. Finally, she reached the edge of the compound, the safe haven prepared by Ayabo and trusted allies waiting just beyond the garden gate. Exhausted, trembling, yet triumphant, Adebisi stepped into their arms. The small act of defiance, the first real movement toward freedom, had been successful. Relief and exhilaration mingled, tears streaming down her face. She had acted, survived, and learned something invaluable. Courage was not an abstract idea. It was action, even in the face of terror. That night, lying under the open sky with the cool breeze brushing her face, Adebisi realized something profound. The first escape attempt was more than just physical movement. It was psychological liberation. Obinna's fury, though still dangerous and looming, no longer held the power to crush her spirit. Each heartbeat was a declaration. She would survive. She would fight. And nothing, not fear, not violence, not cruelty, could take her determination away. The garden became her sanctuary, a temporary reprieve, a place where she could breathe, plan, and ready herself for the challenges that lay ahead. The night whispered of hope, danger, and a future reclaimed through courage. And in that quiet darkness, Adebisi finally understood that the first step toward freedom was the most powerful act of all. The first signs came quietly, almost imperceptibly. Whispers carried through the village streets as women drew water from the wells. as men tended to their small plots of land, and children peered curiously from behind the wooden fences of their homes. Word spread like a slow-burning fire. Adebisi had acted, and she had survived Obinna's wrath. Her courage, small as it seemed at first, ignited a spark of hope among those who had long lived in fear of him. The market square, usually a place of mundane chatter, became a hub of murmurs. The villagers shared secret glances and hurriedly spoke in hushed tones about the young woman who had dared defy a tyrant in their midst. Some whispered prayers, others offered small gifts, her mother's neighbors sending fruits and herbs as silent signs of solidarity. Each act, however minor, was a declaration. They were no longer willing to let fear dictate their lives. Meanwhile, Obinna's fury continued to rage behind closed doors. He stormed through the village paths, shouting threats at anyone who dared speak of Adebisi's actions. But the villagers, emboldened by the knowledge of her courage, held their silence, not out of fear, but out of unity and newfound resolve. Even his closest supporters began to waver, realizing that the balance of power was shifting, subtle as it was. Adebisi, hidden safely in a nearby hut with Ayabo and her trusted allies, observed the stirrings with quiet satisfaction. Through the cracks in the walls, she saw villagers exchanging glances, nodding silently in agreement, and whispering protective warnings to each other. Her small acts of defiance, the escape, the secret letters, had reached beyond the walls of her confinement. They had planted the seeds of resistance. That night, as the wind carried the soft sounds of the village to her hiding place, Adebisi allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The villagers had taken notice, and in that recognition lay a subtle but powerful form of protection. Her courage had sparked a movement, fragile but real. And in that fragile spark, Adebisi found renewed strength, ready to face the next storm Obinna would bring. The sun had just begun its descent, casting long shadows across the village, when Obinna appeared at the edge of the clearing. His eyes burned with fury, his jaw tight with rage, and his hands clenched as if he could crush anyone who dared defy him. The villagers froze, knowing full well that any wrong word or gesture could provoke his wrath. But something had shifted. The whispers of Adebisi's courage had traveled faster than he anticipated, and he could feel the stirrings of rebellion in the very air around him. Adebisi stepped out from behind a large baobab tree, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest, yet her stance unshakable. She had chosen this moment carefully, knowing that a public display of defiance could be her strongest weapon. Her eyes, tearful but blazing with determination, met Obinna's. He took a step forward, his voice booming. "How dare you show your face in my presence?" The villagers watched in silence as the tension thickened, their fear battling with the inspiration Adebisi had ignited in them. Slowly, Adebisi lifted her chin and spoke, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I am not yours to command, Obinna. I am not yours to control. Your threats, your anger, and your cruelty mean nothing to me anymore." A hush fell over the clearing. Obinna's face twisted in disbelief, his ego wounded more deeply than any physical attack ever could. He had ruled with terror, and yet here stood a young woman, trembling but defiant, challenging his authority in front of the entire village. The air crackled with tension, and even the wind seemed to pause in anticipation of his next move. Then, without warning, Obinna lunged forward, attempting to intimidate her physically. But the villagers, emboldened by her courage, stepped between them. Men, women, and even older children formed a loose circle around Adebisi, their presence a silent but powerful declaration of solidarity. Obinna froze, taken aback by the very thing he had never anticipated. Resistance that was not just her own, but shared by the community. "You will not touch her," a village elder said firmly, his voice carrying authority and conviction. Obinna's fury surged, but the murmurs of support for Adebisi grew louder, and he realized that brute strength would no longer suffice. For the first time, he felt the unsettling weight of collective defiance. Adebisi took a step forward, emboldened by the villagers' courage. "This ends now, Obinna. Your reign of fear is over. I will not bow. I will not hide. And I will not be silenced." Her words, simple yet powerful, struck at the very core of his ego. Rage burned in his eyes, but the villager's unwavering stance left him momentarily paralyzed. The first real confrontation had ended not with violence, but with a revelation. Power had shifted, even if only slightly. Adebizi's courage had inspired action, and the villagers had taken notice. Obinna, furious and humiliated, retreated to his compound, plotting vengeance in silence. But the seed of defiance had been sown, and it could not be undone. As night fell, Adebizi returned to her safe hiding place with Ayabo. Her hands shook from the adrenaline, but her heart swelled with hope. She had faced him, not hidden, not fleeing, but standing boldly in the open, and survived. The first real confrontation had proven that courage, when shared with others, could challenge even the fiercest tyranny. The night was quiet, but inside Adebizi's hidden room, the air was thick with anticipation. She sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, the small stack of letters and papers she had secretly collected clutched to her chest. Each document detailed Obinna's abuses, threats, manipulation, and cruelty carefully recorded over months of silent suffering. Each word, though faint on paper, carried the weight of her pain and the undeniable truth of his tyranny. Adebizi's hands shook as she spread the papers out before her, arranging them carefully so they could be easily understood. There were witness accounts, notes from servants too afraid to speak openly, and sketches of the cruel methods Obinna had used to intimidate her. Each piece of evidence was a dagger of truth, aimed directly at the heart of his unchecked power. She traced her fingers over the words, feeling a mixture of anger, sorrow, and fierce determination. Ayabo leaned close, whispering reassurance. "This will work, Adebizi. Once the elders see this, the villagers will no longer have to fear him. Justice will begin." Adebizi nodded, her lips tight with resolve. The fear that had once paralyzed her now fueled a cunning clarity. The proof in her hands was more than just paper. It was her shield, her sword, and her voice when she could no longer scream. The next morning, they moved carefully through the village, ensuring the papers reached trusted elders first. The reactions were immediate and powerful. Shock, disbelief, and outrage coursed through their faces as they read accounts of Obinna's manipulations. Eyes widened, hands clutched hearts, and murmurs of anger and sorrow spread like wildfire. For the first time, many villagers realized the full scope of his cruelty, a darkness they had suspected but could never fully confront. Word spread quickly. The villagers, once silent out of fear, began to murmur openly, questioning Obinna's authority and whispering plans to protect Adebizi. Even the younger men and women, who had long felt powerless, found courage in the undeniable evidence of his past crimes. Adebizi watched from a safe distance, heart pounding, tears of relief streaming down her face. She had turned fear into proof, silence into revelation. The act of collecting evidence, seemingly small and cautious, had become a powerful weapon in the fight against tyranny. By evening, the village elders convened a secret council. The documents were presented, carefully discussed, and verified. The truth could no longer be denied, and for the first time, Obinna's control over the village began to crack, not because of force, but because of the undeniable power of truth. Adebizi returned to her hiding place, exhausted but triumphant. Her first act of defiance had sparked resistance. Her evidence had inspired courage. The seeds of justice had been planted, and the storm of Obinna's fury, though still threatening, now faced a force it could not fully control. For the first time, she glimpsed the possibility of victory, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered under his cruelty. Adebizi began planning her escape in earnest. She coordinated with Adebi and a few trusted villagers, marking the safest routes, timing Obinna's absences, and preparing a safe location where she could hide. Each detail required meticulous care. One mistake could be fatal. At night, she rehearsed her plan in her mind, visualizing every step, every obstacle, every possible betrayal. Her heart pounded with fear, but it was tempered with purpose. Courage, she realized, was not the absence of fear, it was the mastery of it. Obinna, meanwhile, continued his psychological manipulation, unaware of the storm brewing in the heart of the woman he thought he had enslaved. Adebizi had begun to move like a shadow, silent, clever, and patient, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim her life. The air was thick with tension as Adebizi moved quietly through the shadows of the village, clutching the stack of letters and documents she had gathered as proof of Obinna's cruelty. Every corner, every rustling leaf made her pulse quicken. Obinna's fury had grown unpredictable, and the village was tense. Anyone could be a spy. Any ally could be discovered. Yet she had learned to read the subtle signs of loyalty, and tonight she was seeking someone whose allegiance could change everything. It was Ayabo who had first whispered the possibility, a man known as Chukudi, quiet, unassuming, and a trusted craftsman in the village, had long resented Obinna's tyrannical rule. Few dared approach him, for fear of reprisal, but Ayabo assured Adebisi that his heart had always been with the oppressed. The thought of gaining him as an ally sparked hope and a plan. Adebisi found Chukudi at the back of his workshop, carefully working on a wooden carving under the dim light of an oil lamp. He looked up as she approached, eyes cautious, reading her posture and expression like a careful judge. "I know you are brave," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "I have evidence of Obinna's crimes. The villagers are beginning to see the truth, but we need someone like you, someone with courage and knowledge of the village, to help us protect those who are vulnerable." Chukwudi's hands stilled over his tools. His face, lined with worry and age, softened as he listened. He had watched Adebisi's defiance from the shadows, had seen her courage when most would have faltered. For the first time, he realized that silence was no longer an option. "I have long feared him," Chukwudi admitted, voice trembling slightly. "But seeing what you've done, your courage, I cannot stand by any longer. Tell me what I must do." Adebisi handed him the documents carefully, her fingers brushing his. Together, they pored over the evidence, discussing who could be trusted and which strategies would minimize risk while maximizing protection for the villagers. Chukwudi's knowledge of the village's hidden paths, secret supplies, and loyal contacts became immediately invaluable. Adebisi realized that the unexpected ally she had gained was not just another hand to fight, but a mind that could outmaneuver Obinna in ways she had never imagined. By nightfall, a plan had begun to take shape. Chukwudi would help relay messages to the villagers discreetly, protect key areas, and provide safe passage for Adebisi if she needed to move quickly. For the first time, Adebisi felt the balance of power shift, even slightly. The weight of isolation that had once pressed on her chest was lifting. She was no longer alone in this fight. As the two parted under the pale light of the moon, Chukwudi placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Your courage has sparked hope," he said quietly. "I will not let it die. Together, we will ensure that Obinna cannot harm you or anyone else again." Adebisi nodded, tears pricking her eyes, feeling the strength of an ally she had not expected but desperately needed. The storm of fear and fury was far from over, but with this new bond, the tide had begun to turn. The village seemed quieter than usual, but beneath the stillness, tension coiled like a snake ready to strike. Every step on the dusty path, every whisper behind closed doors, carried weight. Adebisi moved cautiously with Ayabo and Chukwudi, mapping safe routes, checking traps, and ensuring the villagers who had agreed to protect her were ready. Their hearts beat in silent synchronization, fear, hope, and anticipation blending into an almost unbearable tension. Obinna prowled the village with eyes that burned like fire. His control had always been absolute, but he could feel the cracks forming around him. The whispers, the suspicious glances, the subtle defiance, it all gnawed at him. He lashed out at anyone who looked at him the wrong way, his fury escalating into a dangerous unpredictability. Each shout, each threat, only intensified the villagers' caution and, secretly, their growing courage. Adebisi knew it was only a matter of time before Obinna discovered her hidden alliances. She could feel the weight of each passing hour pressing on her shoulders. Every rustle in the night could be his spies. Every shadow could conceal a threat. Yet for the first time, she felt a strange mixture of fear and power. Fear sharpened her senses. Power strengthened her resolve. The tension in the village was no longer just a threat, it was a test. That evening, Adebisi and Chukwudi met with the village elders in secret. They discussed strategies, potential risks, and ways to shield the vulnerable. The elders, once too afraid to speak, now leaned into her courage, inspired by the evidence of Obinna's past crimes and the bravery she had displayed in public confrontation. Plans were whispered and nods exchanged. Even the smallest misstep could spark violence. yet determination now outweighed fear. As night fell, Obinna's presence loomed like a storm over the village. His anger was a tangible force, filling the air with dread. Every house was watched, every alley patrolled, and every villager's glance scrutinized. Yet in the shadows, Adebisi moved with quiet precision, coordinating messages, checking on allies, and ensuring no one was left vulnerable. The tension was unbearable, like a taut bowstring ready to snap, but she had learned to thrive in it. The villagers' loyalty to Adebisi became a quiet rebellion in itself. Small acts of courage, leaving a message, hiding supplies, silently guiding her through the village, multiplied. Obinna noticed these small signs, his fury and paranoia growing with every subtle act of defiance. The air vibrated with anticipation, a collision of fear, anger, and courage waiting to erupt. By midnight, the village felt like a living organism, tense with potential energy. Every creak of a door, every shadow, every whisper carried danger, but also possibility. Adebisi stood in the center of the storm, heart pounding, eyes sharp, mind racing. She had survived his fury, gained allies, and uncovered proof of his crimes. Now, the tension rising around her was no longer just a threat. It was the battleground where courage, cunning, and justice would collide with tyranny. As she paused to catch her breath, she realized something profound. Fear could no longer control her, but Obinna's rage was far from over. The storm had only begun, and in the midst of that storm, every heartbeat, every careful step, and every ally's whisper became a weapon of survival. With Ayabo's key in hand, Adebisi began exploring the secret passageways that could lead her to safety. The small iron key felt heavy with possibility, a tangible symbol of hope. Every night, she tested the route carefully, memorizing obstacles, noting guards' movements, and perfecting her timing. Her confidence grew, though fear remained. Every sound, footsteps, a door creak, a sudden cough, made her heart race. Yet the knowledge that a safe escape route existed gave her strength she hadn't felt in months. Obinna, unaware, continued his manipulations, increasing psychological pressure. He berated her, criticized her actions, and reinforced the idea that she was powerless. But each cruel word, each act of intimidation, became fodder for her strategy, teaching her patience, observation, and subtle cunning. The villagers and her mother continued their silent support, sending messages through trusted allies. Each coded word from home was like a small flame lighting her way through the darkness. Slowly, step by step, Adebisi was preparing to take back the life that had been stolen from her. By the end of the month, the path to freedom was clear in her mind. She was ready. The pieces were in place, the allies were loyal, and her courage had grown sharper than any fear Obinna could muster. One moonless night, Adebisi successfully sent a detailed letter through the secret passage to her mother, outlining Obinna's cruelty and the exact plan for a rescue. For the first time, she felt the thrill of agency, the rush of doing something dangerous and victorious. She returned to her room silently, heart pounding, tears of relief in her eyes. The knowledge that someone outside knew her plight and was prepared to act gave her strength. She whispered, "I will survive. I will not let fear define me." Obinna slept nearby, unaware, his arrogance blinding him to the storm building in Adebisi's mind. Her spirit, once crushed, now carried the weight of resolve, and for the first time in months, hope felt tangible. Obinna noticed subtle changes in Adebisi's behavior, her quiet observation, her careful movements, and the defiant gleam in her eyes. He demanded explanations. "What are you hiding from me, Adebisi?" he barked. She feigned innocence, her pulse hammering, but inside, she knew that he was becoming dangerous. One wrong word, one misstep, could bring violence. Every plan had to be executed flawlessly, yet the more he tried to intimidate her, the more she realized she had nothing to lose except fear itself. Obinna began searching her room, but Adebisi had prepared. She had hidden letters, tools, and the key cleverly. His frustration grew, and he vented his rage through threats and verbal cruelty, unaware that his control was slipping. That night, Adebisi whispered prayers of protection, feeling the presence of her ancestors guiding her. Courage replaced panic, and clarity replaced despair. She was ready to act. The night arrived. Adebisi and her allies coordinated silently. Adeobi and a few trusted villagers were stationed at key points, ready to aid her if Obinna discovered the plan. Every step, every whisper was precise, rehearsed, and fraught with danger. Adebizi dressed in dark clothing, moving with stealth and determination. She carried the key and letters, her heart both fearful and exhilarated. Each breath reminded her that failure could mean disaster, but each heartbeat was a drum of courage and survival. Obinna was asleep, his door slightly ajar. Adebizi paused, listening, counting her steps, and timing her movements perfectly. She slipped into the passageway, the walls of the house pressing in, the shadows her allies. The night air beyond the garden promised freedom. Halfway through the secret path, a guard appeared unexpectedly. Adebizi froze, heart hammering in her chest. Slowly, silently, she slipped into the shadows, pressing herself against the wall, barely breathing. The guard paused, then moved on. Tears of relief and fear streamed down her face. The danger reminded her of the stakes, but each successful step strengthened her resolve. Freedom was near, and she could taste it. At dawn, Adebizi reached the rendezvous point where her mother and allies awaited. Mama Kimi ran to her, tears streaming down her face. "My child, you are safe," she cried, embracing her daughter tightly. Adebizi collapsed into her mother's arms, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. For the first time in months, she felt the warmth of love and safety. Her ordeal, though not entirely over, had reached a turning point. Obinna awoke to find Adebizi gone. Rage, panic, and disbelief surged through him. He searched the house, shouting for servants, turning the compound upside down. The realization that she had outsmarted him for the first time shook his arrogance to its core. Meanwhile, Adebizi, hidden safely, watched from a distance as the man who had terrorized her discovered the limits of his control. The sight filled her with a cautious sense of triumph. Obinna arrived in the village, attempting to retrieve Adebizi. Villagers, aware of his past and her suffering, blocked him. Elder Tund and Mama Kemi confronted him publicly. "Enough. You will harm her no longer," Elder Tund declared. Obinna's fury was uncontrollable, but he faced a united front. Adebizi's courage and her mother's support, combined with the villagers' protection, left him powerless. His attempts at intimidation faltered. Seeing his control crumble, Obinna's arrogance turned to desperation. Adebizi, standing tall beside her mother, confronted him. "You have no power over me anymore. I am free." Her voice, strong yet trembling with emotion, silenced the crowd. Tears streamed down her face, a mix of fear, relief, and catharsis. Obinna's threats were empty now. The young woman he had tried to break had reclaimed her dignity, and the emotional weight of years of suffering lifted slightly. Obinna was reported to the authorities for abuse and intimidation, and the evidence Adebizi had gathered sealed his accountability. He was removed from the village, stripped of the control he once wielded. Adebizi's courage and foresight had brought justice in a way that was both satisfying and necessary. The villagers celebrated her bravery, and her story became a cautionary tale, teaching others the dangers of blind trust and the strength of courage and strategy. Adebizi returned home permanently with her mother. Slowly, she rebuilt her life, reconnecting with friends, family, and herself. Though scars remained, both emotional and physical, her spirit was stronger than ever. Every day, she remembered the lessons of patience, courage, and cleverness. She learned that freedom was hard-won, and that her life was hers to shape. Years later, Adebizi stood before a group of young women in her village, sharing her story. Her voice trembled, but her eyes shone with strength. "I was warned, but I did not listen. I paid a heavy price. But even in darkness, courage can guide you to freedom." Tears flowed, hearts were moved, and the village honored her resilience. Adebizi had transformed suffering into power, fear into courage, and captivity into freedom. The young bride who had once been trapped was now a symbol of strength, hope, and the unbreakable human spirit. Please subscribe, share, like, and comment for more videos.